Welcome to the video. It's a Thursday video. I'm still getting everything set up in my apartment. So the video, I haven't really had time to make up a script for the video or anything like that. And I know the last couple of Thursday videos haven't been great either, because I just haven't had the time. My focus has been on my setting, getting everything ready, moving in, having to bring stability back in my life so I can more focus on college, but also YouTube. And so that's why my YouTube growth has slowed. I'm at 42 subscribers last time I checked. And that's still better than I was, but I'm not growing as fast as I used to be because my YouTube was my focus. But, I had personal life stuff. I had to move and everything, find a job, all that stuff. And so, but next week's Thursday video will be better. But this will be like an unscripted video. And I think so that's that. And so what I really want to talk about is my kind of some life progress, and then we'll get into the meat of the video. And so right now what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of stuff I've been doing about YouTube and life stuff and everything, and then I'll get into the main topic of this video, which I'm thinking it's about the presidential election, what happened, how it went, everything goes down, my thoughts on it, all that stuff. And so I'll try to provide an unbiased opinion on my thoughts because I'm not really political, but I want to provide my thoughts. But before then, let's get into like some live stuff. So if you don't know, I did release a video yesterday. That was my lasagna video. The thumbnail was my lasagna as it came out. It was really good. I don't want to lie. It was very good. I thought it wouldn't be that good because I was doing random ingredients for the sauce. The noodles were good and everything. Those were pre-cooked noodles or whatever, lasagna sheets, so I didn't have to boil them or anything before I put them in the oven. And the cheese, I just used a lot of different cheese, and the provolone with Parmesan was what I used, and then I used some sharp cheddar. But it turned out really good. I've already ate two slices of it. There are six slices in total, but I've already ate two. It'll probably last me a couple of days before I have to throw it out. Well, because it's in the fridge, so it can't stay there forever because it has meat with it and everything. But I'll probably finish it in the next 2 or 3 days. Uh, but that happened. So if you watch that video, it wasn't very good. I was more focused on the food and everything, and I should have prepped all the food and all the meat and everything and had all the portions set up. So it was like chaos. It was. I took too long on the onions because I've never cut onions before and I wasn't efficient with it. And that was all that stuff. But it was a first attempt. And, for learning, you're never going to be the best. First attempt, it's going to suck. Like you are the novice and I'm a novice at cooking. So that's been great. There's my push-up bars too, if you've been seeing that. I can do three max at a time. I was thinking I wouldn't even be able to do one, but I was able to do three. First attempt I tried, I did one, and then I was like, oh. And then I put it on. I tried really seriously, and I did four, or not four, three. So that's how many I've done. I kind of like try to grease the wheel. So on my days off, and I've been in the apartment for most of the day, but I went over there, and every like hour. Try to do a couple. My goal is to be able to do 100 at a time, or at least 100 for the entire day. I think that's an optimistic goal for myself, and so that's my workout goal. I want to get like a bench or whatever that like you use the weights to do like bench presses and everything. One of those, but those are like $50 or $100 or whatever. But I've gotten everything set up. I turned in the form that has like any damages to your apartment. I turned all that stuff in. So I got my mail key. I've got my renter's insurance that they require. Duke Energy is already set up. So everything is set up. I just have to pay it every month. For the first month of December, November, I had to pay the first month whenever I signed the lease. And to next month, I'm going to get that December, I'm going to get that month free because I did a 14-month lease. I get a month free. And so I'll do that month free. So I'll have some time to save up money for my Walmart job. But that's a little bit of life updates. Like I said, the lasagna wasn't the best, or it wasn't. I would say it was perfect. I love that lasagna and I'm still eating it. However, my prepping and everything, and it took me like 2 hours really to make because of that. When I could have done it in 30 minutes if I had prepped all the stuff and everything and measured it out. But that's my fault. It was a first attempt. Uh, so but like I said, right now we're in my apartment and everything, and I'm talking. So let me get some water. So let's get to the main part of the video. Main part of the video is uh, my reaction to the the presidential race. So if you don't know, if you're not American, there was the presidential race or whatever to become president, and there was Donald Trump who was president from 2016 to 2020. He was trying to become reelected, and then you had Harris, Camila Harris. Yeah, she was running for president. She was vice president under Biden, but Biden, I don't think he stepped down, but he kind of went to the shadows after it come out about his cognitive decline. But she's really been running the USA. And so I'm not surprised that Biden, or not Biden, but Harris lost. I'm not really surprised because there was a couple of things you have to realize. Like, even as an unbiased look at it, Trump had his policies, so you kind of knew what he was doing, and he had something to stand behind that people could stand behind. You know what Trump was about. He wanted to get rid of immigration. He wanted to put America first. He wanted to make the government more efficient, cut down taxes and all that stuff. So you know what he was like. But didn't have like any policy. I can't remember anyone. Her media following her campaign was horrible. She tried to erase the fact that while she was vice president under Biden, the economy has gotten worse. The US people have felt that the economy has gotten worse. At least that's their perception of it. Whether you agree or not on that is up to debate. If the US government, the US economic policy, the economic situation is better or worse since 2020, whatever it is, you got to realize is the price of everything has gone up, and people blame the president, and Biden probably didn't have much power over inflation and everything, because really the people really in power in the government are the interest groups that support the government, and they do that, and so they get power and everything. And I'll talk about that in the later part of the video. But I'm not surprised Harris lost. Like, I'm really not. Also, I was looking at some demographics, and I was watching a couple of videos, and the demographics who voted for Trump the most, or not the most, but the people who increased their voting for Trump compared to last time were the Latinos, but also the younger generations. And I can understand that because it's the younger generations who were the most impacted by the economic situation, I would call it. Inflation and everything, job stagnation, most jobs, salaries haven't increased, all that stuff. There have been less jobs over time. There's a lot of ghost jobs. Like, that hurts the younger generation the most because we're still starting out. Because I'm also a Gen Z. I'm 23 if you don't know who I am. And so I'm also I'm one of the first Gen Z, you know, part of the, I'm the first part of the Gen Z generation or whatever, but we're hurt the hardest by it because we haven't had the 10 years to save up money. We really entered the job force and everything, and we're still entering the job force in probably the worst economy in the last 50 years, I would say, since the Great Depression. Because 2008 was bad, but that one, after 2 or 3 years, it really recovered. And that was really the housing market that recovered a lot. It wasn't really the job market that suffered. It was really the housing market that suffered. Now, of course, jobs did suffer, but it's not like the Great Depression where like 30% of people were out of jobs. No, the 2008 was because of greed, and a lot of money got, you know, destroyed. A lot of wealth got destroyed, but for job wise, it wasn't as bad. It was still bad for, the people who were going into the workplace at that time. So that's an interesting thing, but we have to look to the future because Trump was president. That's been confirmed. He won. It's not being debated by any of the media or anything. He has won. Uh, and so we have to look to the future of what Trump would do. So Trump is an isolationist. He wants to make America great again. What does that mean? He wants to do a couple of stuff. He wants to get rid of a lot of the uncontrolled immigration. Now, the uncontrolled immigration does provide some support for the economy. I will say that. That's what a lot of economic people say. The people who are economicists or whatever the word is, whose job is to, talk about the economy and control the economy of the USA. Undocumented immigration, specifically all the immigrants who are undocumented, do provide some good help for the economy. But there shouldn't be so many. I do have to agree with that. There's estimated about 10 million undocumented immigrants in the USA. I do agree that a lot of them should be deported. There should be tighter laws against, the qualifications to move to the USA. Like you shouldn't be a criminal, gang member, any of that stuff. They shouldn't get freebies, which a lot of them are. And so I do agree with him on that. And hopefully he does something about that. And I think he will, but that's just a problem. And I understand why a lot of the Democrats want to keep the border open because there are a couple of reasons. One, the US population crisis is 30 years away, really, where we're going to become the next China, Asia, the Japanese, because basically for most of the world, for whatever reason, people blame different stuff or whatever, birth rates are crashing. And so that is a problem when our economy, most of the developed world relies on the economy growing stronger every year. And the main way to do that is to have a bigger population so you have more consumer spending, people making more money with jobs, more value creation and consumer spending. Those are big portions of the GDP. And to grow that, you have to have a higher population. And what makes it worse is what you have to realize is a lot of people, the economy is bet on the future. What a lot of people realize is they don't know how much money is in the stock market. They don't know how much money is in the futures industry and the future contracts, which are where you're going to buy some commodity for a future price and $100 for 100 bags of rice. You're going to pay $100 no matter the price in a year. And you make a deal if the demand of rice is higher by next year. So, you get that contract, you're buying that rice in a year for $100. But because the demand rises, the rice is now worth $200 in a year. So you make that profit. However, for more demand, you have to have a bigger population. You can't really, create more demand unless there's new industries. So you create a new industry or whatever, or industry blows up. You create a blue ocean. So it's a new product that creates a new industry or something like that. So let's say we didn't have electricity and then you create a new industry around electricity or whatever. That's a new industry, but that's terribly hard. And so demand goes up when there are more people. However, in the US and most of the world, most of the developed countries, but even the ones who aren't developed, majority of the world birth rates are crashing. And so what we have to do for the US to grow their economy, they have to grow their population or at least sustain their population because the birth rates right now are showing that most populations are going to shrink. So most nations, their populations are going to shrink drastically. And so we have to bring in more people from other countries to kind of support our population just to keep the amount of people we have in the US in the next 50 years. And that's just unfortunate. And that's just a part. So that's why a lot of people, a lot of the left, the Democratic Party, I call them left, not anything bad, but just the left, the Democratic Party, agrees with immigration. Also, we got to realize is by bringing in these illegal immigrants or bringing in all these immigrants, what happens is there are more people searching for jobs, so wages get suppressed, and that's good for the elite people. What do I mean by elite? I consider elite are people who never have to work again because they have some type of asset. I consider it with inflation and everything about $20 million. Dollars. If you have $20 million dollars in assets, you can live off the interest. You can have a really good life of making $1 million off the interest every year, and you don't have to work for the rest of your life. Now, if you maybe save up $1 million before retirement or whatever, that's only going to last you like what, like 20 years, maybe max. And that's if you're lucky, if there's no economic disaster or anything. So that's why I consider $20 million dollars the elite, or if you have high power in society. So you might not have $20 million, but you're a politician for the state of North Carolina, because that's where I'm at now. So you're the Senate, you're part of the Senate in North Carolina, whatever it is. And so the elites want the wages for regular jobs to go down because that makes the price of goods go down. But also another thing is they want to decrease competition for the elites levels, because you can't have a ton of elites in society, okay, because the elites take up majority of the power and money in society. That's how it's been throughout history, and so they control most of the power, wealth, and everything. But there are only so many people who can hold that. That's why they're elites. They take up majority of the wealth. Every one elite takes up, let's say, more wealth than the average American or whatever. And so they bring in these immigrants or whatever. They compress the wages of the regular workers of America or whatever, and that makes them harder to grow to 20 million. That's why most people live paycheck to paycheck. It's because it's necessary for that way. Because if you could work a job for 20 years and save up $50 million dollars, and now you're set for life, you don't have to work again, you can do whatever you want. There's not enough money in society for that, okay, for everyone to do that. And so they have to keep the competition really hard. So that's why it's really hard to build generational wealth, I would say, long term if you have a job. Like, what's the max you can save up if you're making 50K a year? Even if you're making 200K a year, let's say after tax, unless you save up a majority of your money, live like nothing, live off 50K a year and save up the rest of the money, do that for 10 years, you're only saved $1.5 million. Dollars. That's not a lot for an elite. Like, if you decide to take that $1.5 million dollars and didn't work, you could maybe not work for 30 years, which is really good. But if you're living to 80 or whatever, that's not true elite. And like, what if you spend that money, if you spend it towards political gains or whatever. You try to gain more power in politics, and so you got to spend more money, and so that $1.5 million dollars goes by in 10 years, maybe not 30. So the elites, the people in power, like that. The people who are institutional elites, I would call it, because there are the counter elites who I'll talk about them too, but those are the counter elites. But the institutional elites who want the status quo in America, where you work the job for 50 years, retire with like $1.5 million, and that hopefully allows you to survive with Social Security till you die. Like all that, they want to have, both counter elites and institutional elites want America to stay the top of the ladder, number one in the world, the superpower and everything and all that. There's no difference. However, the institutional elites like the status quo. These are the people who go to Ivy League schools or whatever and get, are directors of health departments in the US or whatever. You make 500K a year and make all these policies and everything. They benefit. And I'm not saying that's wrong or anything. I don't think that the institutional elites should all die or anything. They're a necessary part of life in America, at least right now, before the system dies. I'm not on their side, but I understand why people would do that. That's like the corporate CEOs of the top 500 company, or not the corporate CEOs. I mean, the people who climb the corporate ladder in all these big companies and everything and hope to become the CTO, or, the chief executive suite people or whatever. That's those. It's the institutional elites who try to gain wealth and power by going through the system, while the counter elites try to build their own company or go outside of the system and become wealthy and rich and in power. For example, that's Elon Musk. And so, but back to it. So that's the reason why the Democrats, the left, want this uncontrolled immigration, because it keeps wages down low, it also makes it so it's harder to rise up to the elites levels if you have a job because wages are compressed. I know that's why I also don't like income tax. And you might say, well, how does the government fund itself without income tax? Well, if you look at other periods of history, a lot of the time the government did not have income tax. The income tax, at least in the US, was is very recent. Um, you look back in the US history, it wasn't until the US tax law, there was the Congress passed the constitutional law that allowed the government to tax income. Before that, you couldn't tax income. You couldn't get taxes from the citizens by their income alone. And I say that the income, that's why we have a progressive income tax in America, at least. And I'm talking about America. The problem with that is that also limits competition because the really rich people, the elites, they make their money, they put them in assets or whatever, $20 million. Capital gains income taxes or capital gains taxes like 15%. Uh, However, if you're making $250,000 a year as a job, let's say you're a doctor or whatever, you can be taxed up to, I think, 30 to 50%. Um, and so that income tax, what happens is it disincentivizes, if you want to become really wealthy, you don't want to go into a job because the income tax takes up a lot of your income. Um, However, there are advantages to it, and I'll get to that. And so it creates what it does is it makes it harder for you to become really rich, really wealthy, and all that through your job because income tax is, that takes away 20 to 30, 40, 50% or whatever of your paycheck. And, that's why I don't agree with the income tax because that becomes the problem is it makes it so there's less competition to rise to elites. It makes it harder if you have a job to rise up to that. And so I don't agree with that. Now, of course, there are benefits. So, like the European nations, a lot of them have a higher progressive tax load. So they get taxed more on income. And so, however, with that income, they can provide more stability for their lowest citizens who survive off food stamps or social security, social stuff, and social programs and everything. They're able to do more of that because they have a higher tax income. However, that's why I was talking about this because Trump has mentioned in some points, I don't know if he's really going to do it, is cutting off all income tax and relying on tariffs to make up money for the US government, to fund the US government. That has happened before. They have done that in the past. The US government has done that in history. I looked at it. I do agree with that because if that's a way to do it, yeah. Now, like I said, I don't think he will do it because it also messes with him. Trump is he was part of the counter elite, but he's moved closer in politics and everything into the institutional elite. So I don't know. He'll probably get backlash off of it by the actual people who are really in power, who are really rich. So I don't know if he'll actually do it, and that's a big move to do that. But I do agree if he does do it, I hope he does do it because like I said, it makes it harder for you to if you have a regular job. Now, if you want to start your own company or anything like that, then it's good for it's the income tax is good for you because it limits the really, people who have jobs who are really reaching the higher levels of power in society, status in society or whatever. And so Trump has mentioned he is going to do that. That's one of his policies. What other policies will Trump do? There are a couple. Uh, Trump has assembled a couple of people around him, and I've looked into it after he won the election because I don't really follow politics or any of that stuff. There are a couple of people he has surrounded himself with who will be helpful. So there's JFK Kennedy, or not JFK, the Kennedy guy, the old guy Kennedy. I call him Kennedy, and he is going to become part of Trump's healthcare administration, and he's going to fix the healthcare system, the FDA and all that. And I do agree with him. The healthcare, the health administration and the US government is completely corrupt. If you look at their dealings, they're completely biased. Their food pyramid made most of American kids obese. There are other problems. The FDA, like ground-based or the plant-based meat, a lot of that stuff has not been tested. They were allowed to release that into the wild in the supermarket store when really we don't know the side effects of eating all that stuff. We know it's bad for you because it has a ton of soy, has a ton of calories that are really, it's really like carb based. It's not even real protein. And so that's why I don't eat plant-based meat or whatever. And the health benefits are really bad. The FDA, if you look at the articles that the FDA published to approve plant-based meat, it's completely crap. They didn't do much research. They didn't go all do all the research on it. A lot of the ingredients were not covered in the FDA agreement. They did not do much research into it, and it's like all these different chemicals. So I agree with Kennedy. He does need to fix the medical system along with the insurance because what you have to realize is in America, if you're not American, what happens is there's this, I call it the guild system because it's reminiscent of that in the 1800s, 1900s, well, not the 1800s, but in the Renaissance period where there were a lot of guilds who worked together to kind of create monopolies. And so that's what happens in the USA. So the doctors work together with the insurance companies who work together with the hospital administrators so they can they can jack up the price of all these different healthcare stuff, all these surgeries, this medicine, they all jack up the prices. And they do this because they work together and they lobby the US government. Because after you get your doctor, let's say you want to become a doctor, after 10 years and all this medical school and all this other stuff, you have a ton of debt on your back. So the only way you can do it is if you make really high wages. And to do that, you have to make your costs to do these surgeries to advise the public or whatever costs a ton of money to pay off your debt. And so that's what happens. That's why the doctors are complicit in it, or they let it happen. They might not be complicit in it, but they know that it happens. They could get the price down of medicine, all this other stuff down completely way lower, but they're not willing to do it because they spent 10 years of medical school. It costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And you also got to realize the medical schools limit the amount of doctors that, they enroll every single year. So they keep the number of doctors really low in the country. That's why Asia, it was an Asian country. I saw the news on it. Apparently, they were having a shortage of doctors, and so they increased the amount of doctors they could enroll in their medical schools. And a lot of the doctors walked out in that country, walked out, started protesting, saying, "Why did have all these? Why did you hire more doctors or start to train more doctors who put in all this time or effort in this degree or getting this college education, all that, and getting this doctor education and everything?" And now we're gonna get paid less. That was literally what happened, and I'm not kidding about that. And it was a huge problem. And I saw an article on that, and so that's why Kennedy is involved with Trump. So I'm happy that Kennedy is um, going to become part of the healthcare administration under Trump. I think he will do it. I hope he will fix the U.S. healthcare system, but I doubt he'll be able to do it because there are too many interests interests in the US government by the healthcare system, by the pharmaceutical country. That's the pharmaceutical companies. The only way I can see of it happening is a civil war. If there's a civil war in the USA, that would kind of like reset the whole balancing board for power with all these invested interests. And then Kennedy might be able to get um, all this crap taken out of the US system. But I doubt it will happen. I don't think Kennedy will gain enough power because like I said, there are too many interests who make a shit I don't want to say make a crap ton of money by, making the American people pay way more than other countries. Because if you go to Europe, if you go to Asia, you can get not I wouldn't say way better quality, but the cost is way cheaper. And so that's it. But we have a couple other people. We have Vance, which is going to be the vice president. Uh, I don't know much about Vance. I know he was from the Rust Belt growing up, or he was from the near the area in the Rust Belt, and he's okay about his background because I know a lot of politicians don't like to talk about where they came from and or they disdain their background growing up as a kid because they were poor or something like that. But Vance. From what I've heard about from him, from other YouTubers and other platforms, it seems like he's going to be a good vice president. Now, there are the one guy I want to talk about. There is Elon Musk. Elon Musk contributed heavily to Trump's presidency, his win in politics. And so that means I know why Elon did it. Elon did it because there's a huge amount of regulation in business that he wants cut off so he can make his business better. Especially in SpaceX, there's a ton of space regulations. NASA is in charge of all the space stuff and everything. And that's caused problems with SpaceX before. Like they wanted to launch a rocket before and they couldn't get approval and everything. And it was a big problem. And so Elon Musk supported the fastest person who would cut those regulations. Also, Elon does recognize that the government right now is highly inefficient. I 100% agree. It's a really bureaucratic. You have to have all these different forms for all these different industries if you want to do anything. It's hugely bureaucratic. And that is a problem if a society becomes too bureaucratic. Look what happened to China. China could have industrialized way faster before Britain industrialized, and they would have been the best country in the world. They would have had a head start industrializing, and what that means is they would have been probably a superpower if they took advantage of that, they would have been a superpower. However, the bureaucrats were like, we can't manage this. This is too much work or whatever. So the first industrial revolution never happened in China until after Europe. And that was because of that. And so you can have the same thing happen to other governments. And so that's why I agree. They need to cut the government. They need to cut a lot of the social security stuff, a lot of the social services, because I'm sorry to say this, but social security, the costs outweigh the benefits. It's too expensive to cover the older generations who are retiring because ultimately the younger generation has to pay for that. But the problem is there's more older people than younger people in America. At least not right now. I think the average age of Americans is like 30, 35. That's not a problem. However, 50 years from now, that's going to be a big problem. There's going to be one American or one young American for every three older Americans. And so the system starts to collapse. And so that's why I said before in the earlier part of the video, the economy is run off the basis that the economy is growing bigger every year. And the major way to do that is grow your population. And so that's why I think the cost of Social Security, with the population crisis that's going to happen all over the world, Social Security is not viable unless the government completely funds it and it's not coming out of taxpayers' money. But I just don't think that's viable, unfortunately, because that means I'm not going to get Social Security when I'm 50 or 80 or whatever. That's not possible. That's not in my cards. I don't want to bet on that. Uh, you know, and so Elon Musk is into that. So I agree a lot with Elon Musk, but Elon Musk's main goal is to deregulate a lot of businesses so he can get the Cybertrucks, all that stuff. He can get SpaceX and all that because it'll be exponentially easier if he gets deregulation across multiple industries in business or whatever. So I'm not surprised. I think Elon's the man. He can do it. Now, in the short term, because of all this stuff, I think the US government, the US economy is going to be hurt in the short term. And the long term, I think it'll be better. Because what you have to realize is the Democratic Party wants to keep the status quo of America, which means America's number one. America has an easy life. The average American has an easy life. And you might say, well, I don't have an easy life. I can barely have a job. I mean, look at me. I'm at Walmart making $15 an hour. I can barely afford this apartment. I really shouldn't be able to, but my parents help me. And you might ask, well, that's not an easy job. But look at countries where hyperinflation is right now, going up to like 80% of the value of their money is being lost every year. Look at the countries with huge amounts of gains or whatever. Look at China or Russia. We look at any third world country. What happens is the U.S. government, military military's might, so the US government's military might backs up the dollar, and the dollar, the US government's dollar, our money system harvests the wealth of the entire world. And that allows the US government to provide the US citizens, all of us, with an easy life compared to a lot of the third world countries. Look at South America, look at a lot of countries. Okay, we're able to do that because we have the most powerful military in the world, and we use that to make our currency the reserve currency of the world. And we're able to print infinite amount of money because the backlash is carried over to the rest of the world. And so it doesn't harm us as much. Now we still have problems with inflation, but it's not as bad because we can use ourselves as the reserve currency of the world and give the cost of that spread it out to the entire world. And so that's what the left is. They want to keep the status quo of doing that. So they want to keep the declining American order. That's what I call it. There's the declining American order as a superpower. They're trying to delay the decline for the next 30 years or whatever and keep the dollar status alive while BRICS is coming around, while Bitcoin is coming around, all that stuff. And while the US's allies are losing confidence in the US, okay, in the US's governments specifically. Well, with the Trump administration, what he's trying to do with the coalition that he's trying to do is kind of before while the US is declining, what they're trying to do is they're trying to stop the decline. But to do that, the US has to suffer in the short term. And so next 10, 20 years will be rough, but in return, you'll have the reinforcement of the US's power as its superpower for the next 100, 200 years. So that's what it is. That's why Trump's like make America great and again, make America great again. Okay, he's doing all that stuff and everything. He's trying to stop the decline of the American empire, which is what we are. We are an empire of indirect power, but we still are an empire. However, to do that, he has to take some short-term measures like reduce the budget in the US government, cut off a lot of stuff, become more isolationist, and cut off a lot of immigration. And so that's a problem. And so that's why a lot of people don't want to do that. They like their healthy life. If you're an upper middle class American and you're not worrying about money, you own your home. You have that's my parents, really. My parents are like that. If like my parents, I don't like to talk about my parents or whatever, but my parents are pretty wealthy. I'm just going to say that. If you're okay wealthy from working a job for 20, 30 years or whatever, and you own your house and stuff like that and everything, then it's beneficial for you to keep the status quo because you're doing really good at the status quo. But for the most unsatisfied people, that's a lot of the younger generation, especially a lot of younger males. That's why a lot of younger males are turning in right because they don't like the situation the US is in right now, and they're okay with the short term pain if they get longer, longer term benefits. Okay. However, like I said, that's what Trump is trying to do. He has surrounded himself with a new block of power. Um, I think that's a great thing, especially Elon Musk makes me confident that he will succeed. Because the thing with Elon Musk, I'm not an Elon Musk fanboy, but it's what he represents. Okay, Elon Musk represents the Silicon Valley type. That's technology is going to change the world for the better. What Elon Musk wants to do and what a lot of the people who have techno optimism or any of that type of stuff is they want to use technology's power to dominate the rest of the world in the next 100 years. Okay. That's why the AI people are like that. That's why you ask all the people who are doing the gene editing stuff to make our lifespans longer or have babies that are gene edited and all this stuff. The reason they do that is they want to use technology to cement the US's superpower status in the next 100 years, and that's going to stop the decline of the US superpower. So the left and the right have two different ways of seeing it, but both want to cement the US's superpower status. The left know the US is declining, but they want to try and slow it, while the right it wants to go, okay, we're going to cut off a lot of the bad stuff, and we're going to take some short-term pain, so long-term we'll have a chance before we get crushed by China in 50 years from now. That's why I say the Democrats have a short-term memory, and the Republicans have a longer-term memory. But the techno optimists, I agree with that. That's my view is you can use technology to, especially the next 20 years with all this new technology coming out, to benefit society and benefit the US's power and make the US the superpower for the next 100 years. However, like I said, that's difficult. We need more funding into the scientists who are researching all this on the cutting edge of technology. So space stuff, we need more investment in space, AI, computers, the internet, computer internet, and lasers, energy detection stuff, and robotics, which is drones, because we're already seeing drones change the future of warfare. And so I think we have to take advantage. I think that's the only way possible because we're already seeing the signs of smaller countries able to take on bigger countries with the use of advanced technology. What do I mean by this? Ukraine has not lost the war yet. A big reason for that is their drones. They were able to repurpose drones, so they were able to stall the Russian victory. That's why a lot of tanks were blown up by drones and everything, because the cost of a drone is 100 times cheaper than the cost of a tank. And you can use a dozen of drones, blow up a tank, and you're still making a ton of money off doing that. And so we're just starting to see the beginnings of symmetrical warfare, whatever, where we're seeing advanced technology becoming the new face of warfare. We're starting to see in the Ukraine Russian war drone versus drone. And we're also starting to see it in third world countries. We're starting to see drones in the Middle East. We're starting to see them in Africa with warlords. Okay, we're starting to see the use of lasers. The US government is researching lasers. We're starting to see lasers on tanks. And so to cement the world superpower, our military, we have to invest a ton of money into these new technologies, these weapons, these technology. I'm talking about drones and lasers as weapons directly for the US government. But economically, we need to increase investment in quantum computers and new types of computing in biology, slowing the aging process. We're already starting to do that, but there needs to be more money funded into it. That's why I agree with cutting off a lot of the social programs. I think we should cut off the social programs and use them to fund technology. Now, how do you divide all that stuff and everything? Who gets the money to for technology grants and all that and all that? That's not up to me to decide, but I think that's just my view. Now, of course, a lot of people will starve, will die, but unfortunately, I think that's the way you have to do. I think that's the way forward for the US if the US wants to keep its superpower status, because we know the US is declining. So are a lot of countries, a lot of the countries, China is having a problem. A lot of countries are having population crises. That's why I don't worry about China. However, I think to cement that, because we're starting to see third world countries and smaller countries take on bigger countries, we have to do that if you want to allow the dominance of the dollar as a reserve currency to continue. I think that's the only way forward is if you do that. Because once you have this third world country who is able to take on the US because they have more advanced technology, and you might say that never happens. We fund more than all these third world countries. It's possible. Okay, it is possible. We're already starting to see the effects. Look at Russia. Our military is very good. We're the best in the world. However, look what happened in the Middle East. Okay, we could take over, we could defeat the Taliban. However, we couldn't keep their territories. It's the same way when a third world country, because this is what happens. You just build a ton of tunnels. Okay, there's new technology coming out to build better tunnels. You build underground cities. Okay, you have guerrilla warfare, and then it's almost impossible to keep a city, keep a territory, or whatever. Okay, then you add drones with that. And so that's what the problem of keeping up with the US's superpower. Okay, we might be able to attack a country, but we'll never be able to take their territory. So they can just crawl back in their underground or whatever and live for the next 50 years underground or whatever. And you might say that's a horrible existence, but we can never crush the country ever again. We'll never be able to crush another country, you know, as a superpower. And so you start to lose that superpower status. We might be able to suppress those people that country economically, but that's the best you can do. So, we might be able to invade. And so the only other option is use nuclear weapons. But are we going to be able to do that? That starts a whole new conversation about when to use nuclear weapons or whatever. And even if they're usable, if they can go into underground cities or whatever, and they're deep enough, then the nuclear bombs don't really work. Okay. And so if you're able to do that, you add drones or whatever, you add drone technology. So the cost to kill a soldier is one robot. Maybe it's 10 robots. How much money is that? Okay, I just have to spend money now. It's not like I have to train people or anything. I need to train new elite soldiers. I can just make another 10 robots. And the only cost of that is money. And, for governments, the most useless thing is money. Okay, you have to realize that. The hardest part for governments, for armies, is finding qualified people to serve in that army. Look at the US. How many people are disqualified from joining the army, the military? I'm one of them. I have hand tremors. I can never do that. But what about the people who are overweight or whatever? They're not able to do it. How many people can do the mandatory physical requirements who can meet those? And just think, and it's supposed to get worse and worse. So for the military, that's the hardest part. But if a third world country who probably has it even worse than America can just make a ton of robots, it kind of equals out the playing field. So that means the US will no longer keep its superpower status, and most countries will be equal to each other. And so if you're a weaker country, it's a really good thing for you. If you're one of the Middle Eastern people, if you're like that are like vassals to the USA, that's like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is really a vassal to the USA. You can say no, it's not, or whatever. Or yeah, you look at Israel. Israel kind of is a vassal to the USA, and you could, talk to me about that. But we can, have a conversation about that. But it is true. If you're a third world country, this is your rise because you no longer have to worry about having enough of a population. If you're a smaller country, you just need the materials to build these robots or these drones or whatever. That's it. And so that's why technology is the newer frontier, and that's why I think the USA, to have the dominance of the superpower, has to invest in this technology. Um, and that's just the war benefits. We're not talking about the economic benefits. You harvest the world like most US companies are doing. Look at Facebook, social media, look at Meta. That's what they are now. Meta, Google, all these different companies, tech companies, Apple, Nvidia, who harvest the world's wealth by selling these goods or whatever. And they basically essentially have a monopoly because their technology is vastly better than most other companies. Okay, look at Nvidia and the AI race, they're better than majority of chip companies. No one can match them. So they have a monopoly on AI stuff and all the chips for AI. So they're making a ton of money. You know how much money they're making from foreign countries, foreign companies. They're making a ton of money. They're harvesting all that world money back. It goes back into the economy of the U.S. people. And so that's what happens. I think NVIDIA is a American company, unless I could be wrong. I don't know much about NVIDIA, if they're based in the USA. But you can take my example to Google. I know Google is, or Apple is based in the USA. Well, not based, their headquarters, they've moved their headquarters for tax reasons, but they hire a lot of Americans. And so the money they get from foreigners, they funnel back into the American people because they hire a ton of Americans. Okay, now of course some of the money they make gets funneled back into they're back into those people because they hire foreigners or maybe they have a headquarters in London or whatever. And so the money they make from London, some of it funnels back into London through paying London's wages. So paying all the people who live in live in London. So they pay all those wages for those people. So the money gets funneled back into the London, back into Europe, back into the EU. So it gets funneled back, but a lot of the money gets taken back to the USA. Okay, because they have vastly more USA people who live in the USA, who are USA citizens. And so I think I think I'm happy that Trump is going in that direction because that's how I see it. Uh, that, and so of course Trump took advantage of that. I know I'm not the only person who sees that. Um, and so a lot of people believe that too. And so Trump has formed a coalition around that. That's Elon Musk is one of the main speakers for that type of group that I'm a part of, that other people are part of, but there are others. And of course, Trump doesn't care about that. Trump is a narcissist. He calls himself, um, he's a wannabe dictator, narcissist. I'm not denying his traits or whatever. However, so I don't think he truly believes in it. However, he just wanted to tell the world he could win again, that he's relevant and everything, that he couldn't be put in jail, all that stuff. So that's just now this is the crazy thing. There are certain periods I want to talk into that. So I talked about the techno optimism that I'm part of, that I think of it is. Now, of course, there are huge problems with technology. Everything could go wrong. We could have corporate overlords or whatever. I think it's interesting to see what the world will be like in the next 50 years, 100 years. However, there are bad effects and good effects. Like the job loss, there's going to be a ton of job loss. How society deals with that, I don't know. However, I do want to say this. Trump is uniquely suited to forming a coalition that controls majority of the US government. What do I mean by this? Well, Trump is a Republican, and there have been periods of time where a certain political party in the USA has become the leader, who have unlimited control. Okay, we're talking about parties, but also coalitions. So coalitions are parties for a certain goal. Okay, but when I'm talking about parties, I'm talking about the Democrats and Republicans. So there have been periods of time where the Democrats have had majority Senate, House, and they have a Democratic uh, president. However, there have been here periods of time in the reverse where the Republicans were the same, where you have full control over the U.S. government. Now, statewide, it's different, but U.S. government full control of that, and they had control of the Congress, or not the Congress, but the Supreme Court. So they had full control in all three parts of the U.S. government. So the federal government, that's what we call it, not the state government, the federal government. So Trump has won the presidency. The Senate is majority Republican. The House, if it becomes majority Republican, I think the Supreme Court, don't quote me on this. From what I've heard, the Supreme Court is also mostly red because a lot of the older generation of Supreme Court, a lot of them died off during Trump's presidency, and he elected a lot of red Republicans or red states. So red I call them red. That's what the Republicans are, and the Democrats are blue. But he elected a lot of Republican Supreme Court judges, and so if Trump has complete control, all four and all three parts of the U.S. government, all four, because we have the president, Senate, the House, and the Supreme Court. He has that. He has unlimited power de facto. Of course, now he has to deal with all the special interests and everything. And I don't I don't think that's possible unless there's a civil war. However, he will have more power than a lot of the times in US history, the last 200 years of US history. And so he could take advantage of that. And if he pushes the US, he'll probably push it into more isolationist, less immigration, all this stuff, make America great, more techno stuff, more techno investment. He's probably going to cut Social Security and cut a lot of this, not Social Security specifically, but a lot of social programs and everything, which, like I said, I agree with. Um, Other people can have disagreements. Now, like I said, he is forming a coalition, which is a group around him. And I think that's why we have Vance. We have another one, a woman or whatever, who I don't know much about, so I'm not going to speak about that. We have Vance, we have Elon Musk, we have Kennedy, we have a couple others too. And so I think he can form a coalition with the techno optimism. I call it that, but there's a specific term for it where he wants to reinforce the US's their superpower with technology, becoming the best with technology, and that will allow outside gains. And he'll be the top of the world. America will be the top of the world because we have the best technology. Right? And so I can see that. What he would have to do is he have to join up with the Silicon Valley types, the startups. Um, I don't think the industry, the Black Rocks, all those and everything. I think they're not going to want to deal with them because they're part of the invested interests in the U.S. government. They're already making a ton of money. They have the U.S. government on their backs, so they can do whatever they want. They can stifle competition or whatever. So that is doubtful. However, Trump does have a interesting coalition around him, his team or whatever. Elon Musk is a counter elite, into counter elite. He wants to get rid of a lot of business regulation. He's in a lot of new industries. Have you seen that? He's not into the typical industries or whatever. It's a lot of industries that use technology for innovation. SpaceX, reusable rockets to provide a ton of value. Electric cars, cars that use electricity instead of gas. So you see, he takes regular industries and he puts new technology on them to transform them. Okay, so he's purely a counter elite. I would say that he's not like the typical businessman or whatever. He's the counter elite outside society, trying to build up new avenues, uh, new blue spaces, so he can provide more value and make more money to the world. And so that's why I'm excited for Trump. The only thing is, like I said, majority of the power in the U.S. government is in special interests in groups that benefit from the U.S. government because we are not a totally capitalist society. I think majority of the money in the U.S. economy is controlled by the U.S. government. You say no, it's not. We're capitalist, whatever. We're not purely capitalist. Not since World War II, I think, or World War One. The U.S. government's power has expanded. There's been a lot of shady dealings between businesses and the US government. And so the US government's power makes up, I would say, 70% of the economy. What do I mean by like power? Well, there's a ton of competition between businesses to get government contracts. And once you get government contracts, you get free money. It's essentially what it is. And you're better than your competition. So the government hands out money for you to develop something or whatever, build something for them or whatever, you've now gained an edge over your competition. So if you're building something, you gained an edge over the next building company or whatever. And you look at how many companies are involved with the U.S. government, it's about 70%. So in total, we're not really a fully capitalist society. That's why the DEI hires, all that stuff happened. That's because it happened to the US government. And for the US government to be happy, all these companies started doing the same thing because they can get easy money from the government. So why should we, actually focus hard on our consumers and building better products when we get a ton of money from the government? That's why we had the problem with the DEI because the government started doing it. They were starting to require it. We got a DEI score, all that stuff or whatever, and these companies wanted easy money, or they're not competitive if they're not getting government money. And so we're not really capitalist completely. And so that's the thing is, so unless there's a civil war, which I know a channel I watch predicts that there's going to be a civil war in the next couple of months, 6 months or whatever, I can see it. All the indicators are going off. There's a lot of social inequality, a lot of wealth inequality, and that's a big trigger for civil war. Because if you're a civil war, you can get rid of a ton of the entrenched interests. So these are the people who benefit from the government's help or the government's help, whatever. But there are also people who are already making a ton of money. So there's a ton of companies who make a ton of money or whatever, and they completely control a ton of industries. For example, the seed company or whatever, who's in control of Monsanto, whatever, who controls a ton of the world's seeds or whatever. They genetically modify seeds. They have a monopoly on it or whatever. So war comes, they get crushed. Their CEO gets killed. All their stock is messed up. A ton of their factories get burned down. All their genetic information is leaked or whatever in a civil war, they're completely ruined. That gives the ability for the people under them, the companies who maybe make $1 million a year in the same industry of agriculture, providing seeds, genetically engineering seeds, who barely scrape by to now rise to Monsanto's level, or maybe not even close to that. Maybe 10 companies combine, rival, they all rise up, and they each combine rival the mights of Monsanto, whatever. That's what I call it. And so that creates more opportunity for the younger players because you've gotten rid of the old player or whatever and killed them off. And so there's now a new vacuum, and it's the same thing in politics or whatever. And so that's what I mean is that you got to kill off a ton of the vested interests because let's say Trump decides to cut off a lot of the social work or whatever, anything cuts off a ton of the funding. Well, the U.S. government, a judge in a state can sue, say we're not going to allow this or whatever, sue the U.S. government. That happened during COVID. It's happened every time. That's why the U.S. president doesn't have a lot of control over the economy because there's too many special interests. So whenever they try to do something or whatever, remember when Biden tried to cancel student loan payments or whatever, and then there was someone who sued him, a ton of states sued him, someone sued him or whatever, some of the Senate rose up or the House rose up or whatever, said that was legal, or they were like, the Treasury can't do that or whatever. So, there in the US, there's nothing like you can have unlimited power. It's not like China where the prime minister or whatever, or Russia with Putin. Putin can do whatever he wants, really. It's not like that in the US. So there's these invested interests in everything who are fighting over power and, fighting to secure their position. Because if you cut, like, let's say you cut Social Security, all the people who have jobs working for Social Security, managing all of that, putting out their money and everything, you cut all of their jobs. Those people are going to riot. They're going to be like, why'd you fire me or whatever? They're going to go on social media or whatever. That's an invested group to keep Social Security. And so that's why I mean when I say Trump might not be able to reform the government as much as I want him to, unless there's a civil war because there's too many entrenched interests and eventually they'll go out and impeach him and this time it'll be successful or they might try to send an assassin after him again after the first one failed. uh, you know some people are like that was an assassin, that was just guy trying to kill her. No one sent an assassin after him. Whoever, whatever you care. It's just the truth of the matter is they could send the assassin over, send the assassin after him, whatever. They could weaken all of his powers so he can't do anything. So they take back the Senate or whatever they do. Like you can go into shady methods, you can go in just regular methods, business methods, whatever, and they can also delay. So that's what happened when the states did. Whenever the president Lincoln was like, "There's going to be no more segregation," or it might not have been Lincoln, but specifically there was the U.S. government, the U.S. federal government was like, "There's no more segregation. Uh, Black kids and white kids can go to school together," all that different stuff. And a lot of states fought for it. And there were like laws passed and everything that harmed the black community and all that, the Jim Crow laws and everything that we learned about in history or whatever. That was all fighting it back against that order. So you can kind of delay the order. So Trump could be like, I'm gonna re recontrol the government. We're going to cut tons of different departments, all that stuff, and they do it, and they just face resistance or whatever, and it takes years and years, and then President Trump has to leave office or whatever, and it's his second term, so he can't get a third term, and so then it all reverts back to before Trump ever was president. From 2024 to or 2025 to 2020, well, 24, yeah, 2024 to 2028. That's what I consider it. Reverts back to when Biden was president. All the stuff he did, all the departments he cut and everything come back because they delayed it until Trump lost, had to leave the presidency because he was done with the president. It had been 4 years, his term was over. And so that's the thing. With the Civil War, though, I was thinking about it. Okay. Most people will still have their jobs, so it's not going to be a deadly war like World War II. What you got to realize is the world wars, more specifically World War II, is one of the wars that are really rare in society. What do I mean by that? Really rare. Well, Uh, what do I mean? Well, simply put, it's the World War II was countries, major powers. These aren't weak governments. These are major powers controlling their entire population to wage war to the death. Okay. What a lot of wars in history were about is you're trying to weaken the social fabric of the enemy government. What do I mean by that? You want to cause enough damage to them, to the government, to the enemy government that it, or to the enemy society, the enemy nation, that it collapses. Okay. If there are too many losses, people start to revolt, whatever it is, there's a civil war, all that stuff. And so you also got to realize these governments were not very powerful for most of society. Okay, it's only been in recent years and in history a couple of times where you have very powerful governments who can control the people or whatever. But majority of history, that was not true. Okay, and so what happens? So it was hard to mobilize your entire population for a war. Okay, and so that's why there were like the 100-year war. There was the 30-year war, all that stuff. They're trying to weaken each other. They're not trying to do total war and death. That's what World War II was. It was I'm going to annihilate you or you're going to annihilate me. Which one happens? We'll see. It was a war of ideologic, ideology. Okay, the Nazis versus the freedom world, whatever you call it, capitalist, whatever it is. The Nazis lost, but they were both waging total war against each other. The Nazis lost, and then the coalition, which was, democracy and all that, won. Russia, they stayed out of it. They became communists after the revolution. China did the same thing. They became communists. And then that came up to the Cold War, where it was Russia versus America, and Russia was communist and America was democracy or whatever. And so that's a little history lesson for you, but the Civil War. So US governments are not completely able to were not able to completely control all of their population. There was limits because of technology, how much people they were, the support, cognition of people. People didn't want a bigger government. Well, now it's the left. The left Democrats want a bigger government. That has been seen a lot in history, and so most civil wars are not like that. It's a small portion of people. Most people are on the sidelines. They take the sheep. They are sheep. I don't mean that in a bad way, but they don't care who wins or loses. They just want their life to be okay. They'll live. They want their job. They want to have a family. Okay, living conditions. Okay. But the majority of people who fight are the extremists, I call them, which are the people who are already in power and the new people who started the Civil War to kind of take over power. And those are the extremes. That's what happened to the communists in Russia. Look at China, the Chinese Revolution or whatever that gave rise to the Communist Party. Uh, the government before China, whatever, I forgot what their name was or whatever. They were fighting off against the Japanese invasion, okay? And the Communist Party took advantage of that. They don't like them to say that. Take advantage of that. The Communist Party did not fight with the other party to defend China. Okay, it was only the before government who fought off Japanese. The Communist Party, or what was the Communist Party in the beginning, ran away or whatever, and it was good strategic move, but it was bad for the country. It was very bad for the country, and so the older government lost a ton of power defending against the Japanese. And then when the Japanese were finally repelled, when they left, the older government was weakened so much that the Communist Party was able to take over way easier. The Communist Party could have stayed and fought with the older government and fought off the Japanese way easier, but they decided not to do so. I mean, it's bad for China, but for their strategy or whatever, they were able to win because of that. If that didn't happen, the Communist Party would have never won. I'm just making that like completely clear. If you look at history, they would have never won. However, the older government got weakened massively by the Japanese invasion. I think it was the Japanese. Don't take me, specifically for that. And so that's why the extremists, so it might be maybe 1,000 people, 10,000 people might die more. And you might think that's like that's a big number, whatever. Yeah, but it is a war. It is a civil war, and that's not bloody for a civil war. It could be way worse. It could be we lose 1 million people in America, and the U.S. population is like 350 million, I think, or somewhere in the 300s. I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's like that. It could be 700 million. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's 300 million. And so that's it. So there could be a civil war in the next year. A lot of the graphs, a lot of history has been showing that with the difference in social inequality, wealth inequality. There's a lot of the younger generation. I know this as a Gen Z, who are dissatisfied with their life, and they think the U.S. government's part of it. That's why now, of course, the if you look at a lot of the polls and everything like that, and a lot of the data, a lot of the older, or not older, but I mean, a lot of the men, younger men are turning more right, and a lot of the younger women are turning more liberal or democratic. You make it what it is. Like I said, people's political views are themselves. I'm not gonna like bash a woman or whatever who's once democratic, once government handouts or whatever you call it. But we just have different views. But that's a part of the truth. Is the problem with that is younger men um, are the generation who are most likely to go to war for a cause or whatever. The older men have, they're older, they're more jaded, I would say. Not a bad thing, but jaded. And they have more responsibilities. They've made more money and everything. So that, they're less willing to sacrifice for more wealth, more money. They're more satisfied. Well, if you're a younger guy like me, you got nothing else to lose. Like I have a Walmart job that's like dead end or whatever. I'm getting my accounting degree and getting an accounting job, hopefully. But like, I could be living out on the streets in the next 5, 10 years. I got nothing else to lose, and I'm just the average Gen Z guy. And I would say I'm better than a lot of the Gen Z guys, but better off at least. But if you're even worse off than me, like you got nothing to lose. And maybe you have a health condition, so you can't join the military, or the military might not accept you or whatever. You might try to join a company, but a company, they won't hire you unless you're a minority or whatever, or they're biased and they're going to hire a minority more if they're going to hire you. So you never get a job. And so most companies never hire you. And that has been a problem in the past if you're a white male. And I am disadvantaged on that. So that's just the reality of the world is I'm less likely to be hired versus a black guy or Asian guy or whatever because DEI hiring and everything and diversity and everything, they're more likely to consider the other guy, even if he has less education than me. It's just a part, especially the bigger companies or whatever. And so, but it's already been a minute, an hour 12. That's it for the video. Uh, I talked a while. I gotta put the trash out because it's almost 6 and they come at 6 to 8. So I gotta go. Have a fantastic day. That was just a serious talk about what's going to go forward with the US government and some of my views too about the future of the government, how I think it should be run, and where the funds that the US has should go, what are the future initiatives they should have, all the policies and everything. So I've talked about that. I talked about the coalition that Trump is forming, how he might have majority power in all three uh, parts of the government, the U.S. federal government. So we'll see. We're in an interesting time, for good or worse. You could say, oh no, Trump's going to have all this power. He's a tyrant or whatever. Or you can say Trump's a God, King, Emperor. You want God, King, Emperor. Like that's the meme. It's where you have Trump in armor and he has a sword or whatever, and he's God, King, Emperor, or he's like from Warhammer, he's the emperor, the human emperor who's like a tyrant or whatever, but it's for the good of humanity or whatever, because there's space gods who like from what I know from Warhammer, there's like space gods and whatever who like cause chaos and to defend them. Like the U.S. has, or the human government, whatever you call it, space government, has to be very tyrannical or whatever. And like some people live on like cities or whatever, and all they do is they're a slave or whatever, and they do it for humanity or whatever, so humanity can survive. That's what some people want. They want Trump God emperor or whatever. And so it all depends. Like I said, it's an interesting time to be alive in if you're American. Um, some people are like, no, it's very worse. Like I'm starting out or whatever, but you get to start out and you get to see what the beginnings of a new revolution is, or maybe the status quo. The U.S. might stick with the status quo as they decline into a normal power. They're no longer the superpower, or maybe there's a second superpower who rises. I don't think it's China. Maybe Russia. I don't think so because Russia can't even take Ukraine right now. I mean, it's doubtful if the U.S. government the U.S. got military can take a Middle East. Okay, could we take uh, Iran? And keep the territory. Okay, and look at Russia. Like we're not, our military is very good, but we can't just be like, we can't take in the, we got to take in the evidence. That's why I don't think China has invaded Taiwan because they've seen Russia struggle against a minor country, which was Ukraine. And so even though the Ukraine has the backing of the EU and they have the backing of the USA, they still are able to take off Russia. So look at Taiwan. That's why I don't think China's taken over Taiwan because they've seen what happened to Russia, and they're not sure. They're not 100% sure. And so I think that is, so the US could become the declining superpower. It could become not the only superpower. It all depends. And I think technology is the uh, barrier. Whoever has the highest amount of technology wins. Now, of course, some countries, if I was a third world country, this is what I would do. I would funnel all my money into one specific technology. So I could funnel all my money into AI. Maybe I funnel all of my money into drones, or more specifically robotics, and not AI as much. And I try to make the best robot shells, and then I get the AI from another country. I would funnel all of my money into laser weaponry, because I think that's the future, or I would funnel all my money into space. I wouldn't take a like spread all approach. So I wouldn't try to put some money into AI, some money into robotics, some money into space, some money into lasers. Now, it is very risky because if you go in the wrong direction, and science talks about this, and let's say you funnel tons of money of your GDP into, let's say, lasers, but it doesn't work out or whatever, and now you're screwed. Or maybe some the US government comes out with an AI that screws you over, that's AGI, that's better than humans, that is super intelligent, and then you're still 10 years away from making your laser weapon or whatever, and now you're screwed. So it's a big risk for a third world country. Now, the US, because it is a superpower and it's one of the bigger countries, I would say, in terms of money wise and economically and everything, they can funnel money into different paths. So they can funnel money into robotics, AI, space, and lasers. They're trying to take a catch all approach because they're able to do that. However, the third world countries don't have that advantage. Now, of course, it's really risky. You could go all in and then you're screwed, and now you're even worse off. However, I think you have to do it. In this changing world, you have no choice. So if you're the president of a third world country and you do that, you're either if your bet pays off, you're the savior of your country. You've elevated your country to superpower status. If you're the only country who has laser weapons and you use that and it has a huge advantage in normal warfare, you're a superpower. However, at least militarily. However, now you might still have weapons, you might still have weaknesses like economic. However, if you take the wrong turn, so let's say you chose lasers, but lasers don't end up working, or they need another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or you choose fusion. Let's say you choose nuclear reactors and it ends up failing. You're the sinner because you wasted all of your nation's resources on this and it ended up failing. So you are the infinite sinner of a society. So it comes out. You have that choice. Do you choose the slow death where you put a ton of money into different nets, or do you take the big risk and you potentially elevate yourself to a higher level? It all depends. If I say you're a third world country, maybe you don't have anything to lose. Uh, you can never go any lower before. You're one of the worst countries in the world, so you go all in. You take the chance. What else is going to happen? Can you lose more? Can you lose economically? Could you go into depression? You're already in that. And so you have that choice. And that's why I said if you're third world, I would go in it. If you're Europe or whatever, you can't compete with all of you can't compete with USA. You can't compete with China. You just don't have the population for China. You don't have the expertise. You're having a brain drain because a lot of the geniuses are going to the USA for better life or whatever. The USA will pay them more, all that different stuff. There's less regulation. So business creators, entrepreneurs go over to USA instead of staying in Europe or whatever. And so for the European nations or whatever, unless they form a coalition and they do that with the EU, but there's too many interests or whatever. I don't believe it. That's why the EU doesn't really have any power or anything. Their militaries, all the European militaries suck because they've relied on the US for decades, and so they crashed their military, whatever. They're like, we don't need it or whatever, and so now they're trying to build it back up. So my only recommendation for them is pick one and just bet all in on it. Now, of course, like I said, you're the sinner. If you're the one making that decision, that's a hard decision to make because which one do you go for? No one knows the future, and so you have to make that choice. And like I said, you could be the sinner or you could be the hero of your country. You could go in the history books of the savior of your country, or you're the one who turn your country into a superpower. And so that's it for the video. Have a fantastic day. That's my decision. What would you do? Do you think if you were a government, would you go for the spread net approach, or would you go all in? Just put it down in the comments. Just let me know. That's a question for the day. Would you go all in, or would you wait? So that's it for the video. Have a fantastic day. I will see you Tuesday. So that's it for the video. Have a fantastic day. I'll see you. Goodbye. That's it.